What's up guys, welcome back to my channel. As you can guess from the title of this video, we're going to be talking about one of my favorite subjects, cars. So I want to give you a very quick bit of backstory. When I was 26, I bought my favorite car at the time, which was an Audi R8. I got the V8 version. It was probably one of the lowest spec versions of the R8 that you could get, but I loved it. It was manual, it was stick shift, and I really just loved the driving experience. Everything about the car, the beauty of the Audi R8 at the time, it was my only car. So although I was able to drive around effectively in what I would consider a supercar, it was also, to be fair, pretty good for day-to-day use as far as supercars go. Now, I actually ended up having a lot of problems with the car. I ended up spending a lot of money on the car because I bought it in the first place, and then any issues that came up with it, I was obviously liable to pay for the repairs. Long story cut short, I actually had a really unfortunate experience with it where I even had to pay for an entire rebuild of the engine, but that was pretty unfortunate to say the least, and not common practice or what I would normally expect when buying a car anyway. I was just unlucky in that instance. But what I would say is that I learned a lot in terms of buying expensive cars, running expensive cars, and it's really made me start thinking about the most effective way of my money moving forwards, especially still wanting to drive nice cars. So fast forward a few years, and my favorite car right now is the Lamborghini Huracan, and it has been for quite some time. I love the Aventador. There's a bunch of cars that I really like, but for me the Huracan is just, for me, a nice balance between aggression in its aesthetics and performance, but also not too far on the top end of that I would consider like an Aventador or something similar. So anyway, that said, I'm really into cars. I don't know everything about them by any means, but I know that I enjoy driving fast cars. I enjoy the look of, you know, sports cars, supercars, and moving out to LA really got me to thinking about what would be the most effective way for me to be able to drive the cars that I want. Leasing, financing, buying, renting, and that's what I want to get into here. So on that note, I have done a lot of research, obviously, and I've come to somewhat of a conclusion, which I want to break down for you here, visually, looking at the numbers and seeing what makes the most sense. So let's use the Lamborghini Huracan as my prime example because it is the car that I really want. So looking at a brand new 29 Lamborghini Huracan, now granted, the specs vary, prices vary, but you're looking in the region of $300,000, $330,000 to buy the Lamborghini Huracan brand new. So I also started looking at used options for the Lamborghini Huracan. Again, prices do vary because performance specs vary. Maybe you're looking at a vehicle that's got 5,000 miles on it, maybe it's got 10,000, maybe it's got more. And obviously the depreciation and the value of those goes down the older it is usually, and also the more miles that it's got on it usually. So I looked at a couple of used options, and I saw a 2016 Huracan at around about $200,000, which is a huge difference between buying the top-end brand new Huracan that I saw as 2019. Okay, now obviously that is already a huge saving, right? We're talking about $100,000 difference here, maybe even more in some instances. But then I wanted to start looking at the leasing options. So 640 HP, V10, Lamborghini Huracan, lease option going for around about $3,800 monthly with a $30,000 down payment plus tax each month. Okay, now that was one example. I also saw a 580 HP. I also saw a 580 V10 for $2,300 monthly plus tax with around about a $20,000 down payment. For the record, I actually looked at some other vehicles in a similar range. I looked at the McLaren 570S, that came in around about 2,300 plus tax as well. I saw a 2016 Ferrari California. That one was actually a little bit more affordable at 1,500 per month plus tax. But as you can see, the Huracan, top end of there, the McLaren, the Ferrari, you're still looking in the region of 2,000 to 3,000 monthly plus tax plus down payment for the leasing option. So I now want to get into some components and things to consider when you're looking at leasing, buying, financing, and what that can look like for different people. And I really recommend that you do your own research on this, because everybody's circumstance is going to be very specific to them. This is dependent on what state you live. This is dependent on if you're self-employed or if you're employed. There are so many different factors that could weigh into your decision and what's going to be more effective for you, that you really do need to do your own research on this. But I'm looking at this from my perspective as a self-employed person looking to get the most bang for my buck. So one thing that you need to keep in mind, especially when buying, sometimes with leasing as well, depending on which state you're in, there's a documentation registration fee that you're going to have to pay. So for example, in Delaware, although they don't necessarily have sales tax, which you also need to bear in mind with all of these prices, they do have a registration fee which is going to cost you 4.25% of the purchase value of the vehicle. These are all things that you need to add into your calculations to figure out what's going to be the most effective way for you to get the most bang for your buck. Another thing to consider as a self-employed person is that if I'm using my vehicle for business purposes, then that has a direct effect on my taxes, because I can essentially claim back a portion of that for the usage of business that I have for the vehicle. Bottom line on that note, if you're leasing a vehicle for personal use, then it's not going to make a lot of difference tax-wise when you're talking about buying or leasing or financing. However, if you are self-employed, there are a lot of tax advantages that you can experience by leasing. Something just to bear in mind. Of course, disclaimer here, seek advice from a tax professional on this. It does vary state to state, and also it varies on different circumstances of how much you use the vehicle for business purposes, etc, etc. Now, I want to show you a little breakdown of some numbers that I've put together based on what we're talking about here. So we've got the Huracan Performante. Now, including sales tax, you're looking at just over 4,000 per month on the lease, average for that. We've got a Huracan 580 V10, where we're looking at around about 3,200 monthly on that. We had a McLaren 750S. I think with the sales tax that came to 2,500 monthly. I put down a Ferrari California. We had that at just over 1,500 monthly, and we also took a look at the Audi R8 2019 V10 version, which is just shy of $3,000 monthly. Now, here's what I'm looking at doing to save some money and also have the option of driving a variety of supercars and sports cars that I really enjoy driving. So when I had the Audi R8, one thing that I found quite often, sometimes it did become a little bit samey. I love the car, but I've got to say, even just on little drives down to the grocery store, I didn't really need to take my Audi R8. I could have taken any car just to pop down the road and go get my groceries. So there were certain days that I almost felt like I wasn't able to use the supercar that I had. If I went on holiday, it was sat on the driveway depreciating. I really didn't feel like I was always able to get everything out of the supercar that I loved so much, and especially on the drives where I really enjoyed making the most of the car. So based on that, that's where one of the big factors for me where buying falls short. Your car's constantly depreciating, you are liable to the cost of all of the upkeep, servicing, any issues when it goes wrong, you are liable for all of those costs and the hassle of that. Equally, when you find with leasing, there's pros to that, where if the car goes wrong, granted it's under warranty and you can go get that sorted at the manufacturer's expense, which is great and a big plus and something to strongly consider, especially based on the points that we discussed earlier. However, you're still paying for the vehicle monthly. If you go on holiday, you're still paying for that vehicle. You're liable for all of the gas that you've got to put into it at all times, even if you are just going down to the grocery store and don't necessarily want to drive a supercar all the time. All your money is going into that vehicle at that time. So what I've decided to do is look at Turo. And for those that don't know, this isn't a sponsored video by any means. Turo is similar to Airbnb, but for cars. So if you own a Lamborghini, if you own any car, you can put your vehicle on Turo and people can rent your car from you on a day-to-day or weekly basis. So I went on there and I started breaking down some of the costs, and I was looking at that and I was thinking, well, for my lifestyle, I only really want a really nice car to drive on the weekends. During the week, I'm basically just going back and forth from the office. It's day-to-day stuff, going to the grocery store, going to do general shopping in bits and pieces. I don't need to be driving a supercar to be able to do that. So what I did is I went onto Turo and I broke down the daily costs of all the different cars that I want to be able to drive. And this is going to allow me the flexibility to one month be driving a Lamborghini Huracan. The next weekend I could be driving a Porsche Boxster. The weekend after that I could have a Jaguar F-Type. There's no end to how many vehicles I can be driving, enjoying different driving experiences, and I don't have to be gassing the car every day of the week. It doesn't have to be sat on my driveway that I'm paying for it while I'm not even there. There's so many benefits, and if I put even a fraction of the amount of money that I would have paid leasing or financing, and certainly not buying the Lamborghini or an R8 or any of those vehicles for that matter, into a separate fund, say $1,000, $2,000, I would have the flexibility every weekend to be driving a different supercar or sports car of my choosing, depending on what I want to do that weekend. And I won't bear any of the other costs of just running and maintaining and servicing such a vehicle throughout the duration of its life or ownership. So on that note, I want to break down those costs and show you exactly what I mean with a spreadsheet that I've done with some examples. There's a Porsche 718 Boxster, we've got the Lamborghini Aventador, there's an Audi R8 on there, Ferrari 458 Italia, even a Nissan GTR. Some of these vehicles are totally affordable on a daily basis, and if I were to just have them for a weekend, it's going to cost me a fraction of the price if I was to look at leasing, buying or financing. So guys, thank you for watching. That is the reason why I will not be buying, leasing or financing my dream car. I am simply going to be renting it on a weekly basis or a weekend basis, every other weekend, whenever I fancy driving it at my own convenience, without having to pay the running costs, servicing costs and depreciation costs of those vehicles when I'm not driving them or enjoying them to their maximum capacity. And that is how I'm going to max out enjoying the driving experience, but also keeping my pennies for investing into other ventures. Hopefully that provided some insight for you guys. Everybody is very different, everybody has their own opinion, and I totally, absolutely 110% appreciate that. This for me makes the most sense of where I am in my life right now. It's going to allow me to enjoy the vehicles that I want to enjoy. It's also going to allow me to save on a bigger scale to what I would have if I'd have put that money into the vehicle that I want to be driving. And so for me, right now, this makes the most sense moving forwards.